Okay, what's going on, everybody? My name is Mangg. Welcome back to Hanging with Mangg, where we're playing some more Valheim. I know. Sue me. Yeah, so there's a seed here that apparently starts you in the mountain biome, and I'm really curious about it, so we're just gonna fire that up. Yeah, so I guess, yeah, I've still been mostly playing Valheim. I've been playing, like I said, with friends. We've got a group of friends going through the game. No one is really playing ahead of anyone, you know, we're just building up our little community, our little village, farming stuff, and, you know, every once in a while we take on the next boss, and it's been pretty fun. So, we finally made it to the plains, and so we're working on taking on the 5th and final boss that's currently in the game. So, should be good. Now, this is not the mountain biome. So we're gonna have to poke around. I hate that it's nighttime. Hold on. I think you can change the time of day. Time of day. Oh, it's already. There we go. A little better. Maybe that was worse. You should be able to set it straight to like noon or something. I don't know what the numbers are. No, I don't remember what the numbers are for like noon. Not that it really matters. We could just sit here and wait. Or I could run around in the dark. Oh, that's what it is. Okay. There we go. So much better, isn't it? Anyways. Yeah, so I think soon we're going to be moving on from Valheim. Temporarily. Until they add in more, you know, content. Which is probably how a lot of people are going to be. I'm sure plenty of people are already done with it for now because they raced through and, you know, there isn't like an exceedingly large amount of content. I mean, yeah, there's unlimited seeds and you know, exploring the whole world is technically content, but you know, once you fought 100 Draugr and shit, you fought them all. But I think we might be moving on to like Monster Hunter World. Possibly. What? I know Monster Hunter Rise is coming out. And I'm pretty excited about that, of course. Always a new Monster Hunter game is great. But not everyone owns a Switch, so we were discussing like what game we could move on to next. And they were talking about like Final Fantasy 14 or Monster Hunter, which is obviously great. I mean, those are two of some of my favorite games. But it's like Monster Hunter World, this is the biggest issue with Monster Hunter World and like suggesting it for a co-op experience is that the co-op experience in Monster Hunter World is kind of bullshit. I mean, in the end, it's all good. I mean, if you're all like done with the story and stuff and you just want to get together and hunt some stuff, I mean, it's fine. It's perfectly fine. It's great. But a group of people starting the game fresh and wanting to play through is really just annoying as hell. And I know this from experience because I did that. I did that with with my brother and my cousin. And I mean, we alleviated it somewhat by having me play on a character that had already beaten the whole story. And I actually played, I went on to my cousin's account, because he had already beaten the game on PS4, so he wasn't missing out on anything. So I went on his account on PC on Steam, and I played through the whole story on his character, so that when he logged on to play with us, you know, he was already done with everything. Because otherwise, if you don't know, in Monster Hunter World, you cannot... First of all, you can't join someone in a story quest until they have watched the cutscene that's part of the story quest. So usually that's when you, like, you start on the map, you go look and find the monster for the first time, and that's when you see a little cutscene. And then you can have people join you. The people that join you cannot join the mission unless they have also seen that cutscene. So you cannot ever view cutscenes as a group. So essentially, once everyone involved has seen that cutscene individually, then they can come together as a group. So if you're doing full co-op, it's like player A starts a hunt, player B starts a hunt, player C starts a hunt, D starts a hunt. It's all the same mission, but they're all doing it solo until they all have seen the cutscene by finding the monster, which could take, you know, different amount of time to, you know, if they're not communicating, if no one knows, you know, it could, you know, whatever. Then once they've all viewed the cutscene, players B, C, and D leave their hunt. They quit out of the mission. And then they can all join A. And then you can just do the hunt normally. And you have to do that for every story mission. Yeah, it is incredibly complex just to do co-op, and it's really stupid, and I don't know what they were thinking. Now, I think Rise has now been leaked, so copies are out there, and it's possible people can answer this at this point, but I don't know if Rise does things differently, but it's really the biggest hurdle in trying to get people to play World, is explaining that nonsense to them. You're like, well, World is a fantastic game, we're going to have a lot of fun, but let me just prepare you. There's going to be some bullshit. It might be better... maybe it would be better to just, like, take a save file of someone that has completed the whole campaign or the whole story, and then you just play through the missions like a second time, but, you know, really it's your first time. So then everyone can just go from the start. That might be a better way to do it. But it's really lame. You'd have to even think of something like that. This definitely did not start in the mountains. I think we can be quite sure of that. Let's see if I can't find some other weird seeds. There's got to be some other weird seeds out there. There's seeds where, like, you have all 5 bosses on the same continent that you start on. You don't ever have to use, like, a boat. That's pretty wild. That is pretty wild. Oh, look at that. That's crazy. Bone mass and motor are like a minute away from one another. That's nuts. Okay, here's another one that claims to start on a mountain. But then it also is listed next to one where it says you start next to the desert. So I don't know what the hell they're talking about, but we'll give it a shot. Let's see here. Let's try mountain again. Anyways, so yeah, I mean, Monster Hunter World, it's perfectly doable. I've done it. We had a lot of fun, regardless of the nonsense bullshit, but yeah, it's just something to consider. I'd probably prefer to play Final Fantasy XIV, but it's a bit more of a commitment. There's a subscription cost, blah, 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 blah. You know, it's an MMO. And that's assuming that they would all get the story skip. Because without the story skip, I would really never want to play Final Fantasy XIV with a group of people. Again, this didn't start on a mountain, and why would it? Why would the game ever start on a mountain? I don't think that's possible. Next to a mountain, I could see that. Yeah, so without the story skip in Final Fantasy XIV, each player would have to play through the story until you got to the few dungeons throughout the story where you'd get to group up and do stuff together. It would just be not fun whatsoever, and you'd basically get together, you know, a group of friends would get together maybe like an hour or two a night, and most of that would just be their like skipping dialogue and just sort of chatting, or maybe getting to do a rare dungeon together. But I think you saw the mountain when you started over the trees. Okay, well, let's not fap about here. Let me just look. Well, this is very anti-mountain. No mountains whatsoever. Let's fly around a bit more. Yep, I'm gonna go with no mountains. So I don't know if these seeds have been like altered or something, or people are just insane, or they're trying to trick you with these seeds. But yeah, not very mountainous. With the story skip in Final Fantasy XIV, if everyone has the story skip or has, you know, played through it beforehand, you complete like all of A Realm Reborn, so all the story missions for A Realm Reborn are done, and you have like every dungeon unlocked. Now normally I guess you would pair this with a level skip so that you could just, the idea is that you buy a story skip, you buy a level skip, and you're basically close to current content without having to play through it all. But if you just do the story skip and not the level skip, you could then level up exclusively through all the dungeon content. You could, well, not exclusively, but after level 15. So as a group then, if we all have access to the dungeons and they need to just level up, every night we can just log on and do dungeons. You know, group content and have fun. So this, yeah, this is like the least mountainous seed I've ever seen. So looking forward to the new expansion for 14. Yeah, going to the moon should be pretty sweet. Sage looks pretty cool. Always like getting a new healer. Should be pretty dang exciting. Anyways, speaking of Final Fantasy 14, I released the 5th episode of the story of Final Fantasy 14 over on the Exploring series. The Wrath of Titan. Not a incredibly lengthy episode. I think it was the shortest one so far, which is what I said about the last one. So you could say they're getting shorter, but I think the next couple will be pretty lengthy. The next one is going to deal with all the stuff in Kurthos. And I think it'll... I mean, I haven't recorded all of it yet, so I haven't mapped it all out yet. But I think it might go all the way through Garuda. That's sort of my mental plan. And then the next episode after that will deal all the way with the end of A Realm Reborn. And that'll probably be pretty lengthy just because I'll throw in, you know, a bunch of the voiced cutscenes from Praetorium and things like that. So, yeah. But then, you know, only a couple more episodes and we'll be done with A Realm Reborn, which is great. And I think originally in my head, I planned out 8 episodes to finish Realm Reborn. So if I can do it in 7, that's even better. And then we can do all the patch quests. I don't know what I'm going to do with that. There's a lot of patch quests. I think there's exactly 100. But, you know, there's a lot of good story tidbits in there. It gets pretty juicy, leading up to the big climax before Heaven's Word. I mean, it gets nuts. That's when Final Fantasy 14 really kicks into high gear. But we also have to do all the Crystal Tower stuff, which would be fantastic if I could fit it into one video. And that'll be my goal. Now, obviously, you can fit any amount of content into one video. You know, I could put all of Final Fantasy 14 into one 50-hour video, but it's a matter of how much work can I do and keep to my schedule of one every 2 weeks. So, we'll see. View counts for that series are obviously not doing well. That's just because the algorithm still hasn't kicked in for anything, and Final Fantasy 14 community hasn't picked up on it at all. People that are watching it seem to enjoy it quite a bit, like I said, so I have hope. I have hope. No matter what, we're finishing A Realm Reborn. This is a mountain, but there's no silver here. Not a big enough mountain, I guess. in the SCP world, I did a video on the Department of Abnormalities. It was good. I had my misgivings about the last SCP I included, but people seem to like the video. Well, thank you, Shady. Yeah, I mean, obviously I love Final Fantasy XIV, and I do think the videos could be better, primarily in the music department. You know, if I had someone come in that really cared about like background music and really like picked specific pieces for each specific scene that I was covering and really, you know, really gave the music an extra touch, it would be better. It's just I'm not that into music, and it's the last thing I put in the video, and I usually just sort of dump something in. I'm trying to get a little better with it because I have noticed people complain, not maybe complain, but offer criticism that compared to an SCP video where you can just have droning background music the whole time, stuff in Final Fantasy XIV, if you're trying to make it more cinematic, it needs to be a little more varied. I don't ever want it to be distracting, but I am trying to do stuff like during dungeons and trials and stuff, we have a little bit more action-packed music. In the last video, during like the scene at the Waking Sands, I put in some more sad music than I would normally use, and you know, little things like that just to try. But yeah, my main goal is always writing and proper editing. Music is also sometimes hard to get to fit right and make sure to have the right tone. Yeah, and I have to worry about copyright claims, so I can't ever have music too much in the forefront and blah, 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 blah. So. Yeah, so Department of Abnormalities. And then this week I worked on a SCP-001 proposal. Yet another one. Hey, that's a big ass swamp. Holy shit. Look at the size of this swamp. Massive. Oh my god. Yeah, so 001 proposal, Memento Mori. This is like, I think it's the newest proposal as of right now. And wait a minute, hold on. Oh shit. Is this oh, right on the edge of the swamp, there's a little nice fulling camp here. With 2 totems. Oh shit, I have to clear this out. I could just swoop in and snatch the totems, but that's cheating, so we're not going to do that. I got to clear it out normally. Legitimately. Nice foggy day for fuck. For fuck. There we go. What was he talking about? Oh yeah, Memento Mori. Newest 001 proposal. It's from Rounder House, who is a great SCP author. And I learned that Rounder House apparently published Memento Mori on their 18th birthday. And this just blows my mind. I mean, this is a really good SCP. And they've put out a bunch of really good SCPs. To be able to do that by the age of 18 is just crazy. Because when I was 18, I wanted to be a writer. I put out some real nonsense garbage when I was 18. So this is just, it's just crazy to see. Yeah, natural talent. Exactly. It's just great to see. And I really hope that they don't just stick to SCP. I mean, I'm glad that we have him as an author in the SCP, you know, community, but they could be doing a lot better. They could be earning bank. Ah. It's the spear throwers that really freaking hurt. I don't know why their spears. Look at that. I mean, it's just fuck. All right. Well, that's a shame. Yeah, so Memento Mori. Really good, really I mean, I like it's a really touching one. It's a really sad one, kind of. It's a tearjerker. I choked up a little bit while writing the script, if that tells you anything. So it is good. I think people are gonna like that one. And next week, I think I'm working on the Onoroi Collective. I don't know. I have to look up pronunciation. I think it's a Greek word. It's a group of interest that like lives inside of dreams or something like that, and they make like anomalous, like dream related anomalies. I don't know. It's another sort of just SCP showcase rather than like a deep dive into what makes them tick. But SCP showcases are always good. Yeah. And I think I'm going to do another Q&A this week. It's been about a month. Feels like this month flew by. So that should be fun. Probably on Thursday. Yeah, I didn't really mention, but I think we're gonna be going for the for a second walkthrough of one of the homes that I've been looking at. Nothing else has really popped up on the market that compares. And I mean, it's the one that we're looking at is like, I guess the one I'm looking at. I mean, my family's involved, but really it's me. The one that I'm looking at, I wouldn't say it's quite a dream home, at least not yet, but kind of close. It's kind of close. You know, I was just saying like, it's a home that I can just like envision myself living in, which I think is kind of important. You know, it's a home that I just sort of liked from the get-go. And yeah, it's sort of extravagant for one person, but it's an entertaining home, no doubt. And I guess I'm gonna have, I mean, nothing's set in stone yet, but there's a good chance I'll have my parents living with me temporarily, which is a nice, it's a nice turnaround. I lived with my parents for many years. To have them live in my house for a little while is kind of funny. But my sister and her family want to build a house. They really got their heart set on building a house, but they have to sell their current home in order to, you know, achieve that. And so they need a place to live. Now, I don't want to live with my sister's family because she's got 4 kids, and that's a nightmare. So what I figured is that my sister's family could all live at my parents' house, at our parents' house. And while they're doing that and the build's going on, my parents could just live with me. So it seems like it could be fine. It's important when you see a place you get a feeling that, hey, I could see myself living there. Yeah, that's what I figured. And I can definitely do. None of the other places I saw, I felt like that. None of the other places I was like, I'm ecstatic. But I really liked the one house, and everyone in my family I brought with to look at it loved it as well. And it's just like, the price at the time was a little high. They've done a little bit of a reduction since then because no one's biting, which is good. And I've got a really good real estate agent that'll probably shred them a bit more so we can get further reduced. So, you know, oh my god, this is no wonder there's 2 totems here. This is insane. There's so many of them. Look at this nonsense. I need to run into like a gray dwarf community. I'll pick up the pieces. Jesus. Follow me to the ends of the earth. Oh, fuck my parry. Oh, man, I'm not even thinking straight. Keep running. We'll find some sort of distraction. God. Yeah, so I did get pre-approved for pretty much the price of the house. So, I mean, things are looking good. See ya. We're gonna do a second walkthrough, bring in some more opinions. Now that the snow has melted here in Wisconsin, we can get a closer look at the lot itself and, you know, just see what else we can notice. And we'll go from there, you know. Yeah, so it's pretty exciting. I don't know how long that whole process will take, but I also got to get this condo fixed up a little bit. I got to get a hole in the ceiling patched up due to the tub leaking a little while back, and I got to get some walls painted, but it's mostly minor stuff. Because, you know, I got a puppy on the way, apparently. I decided to bump back down to 1 puppy instead of 2. You know, the idea of having 2 puppies, siblings at the same time, it's nice, but it's just not really a good idea. I'm not a dog owner. I've never really owned a dog. And I can't even say I'm really a dog person. I just want to dip my toes into dog ownership. So 2 puppies is not a dip. 2 puppies is a dive. So all I wanted in the first place was 1, and then, you know, they tried to they offered me 2 puppies, and everyone was like, "Oh, that would be so great to have two sibling puppies." Oh yeah, and it's like, but all I really wanted was 1, and I don't want to be guilt tripped into getting 2. That's no good. So just give me the 1. You know, they'll probably have some more puppies in the future if I ever want a second one. So yeah, we're just gonna stick with just Coronet. Just Coronet for now. But yeah, so I'm busy, I guess I would say. Between SCP every week, Final Fantasy 14 being a constant concern, doing the house process, all that, and trying to finish this Final Fantasy 6 little project that I've been working on. I got a lot of things going on, and so that brings up the concept of an April Fool's video. I didn't really ever want it to become like a tradition because, you know, as you know, I don't really almost ever work on videos outside of my normal release schedule. So having to put together an April Fool's video every year is just, it's been a burden for a while. And it didn't even take that long, because really the first couple were like just flash in the pan ideas that just sort of struck me, and I was just like, this is funny, I want to do this. So the first one was the My Little Pony thing. That was the first April Fool's video I did, and it was just sort of like, you know, I'm covering like Cthulhu mythos and stuff like that. It's funny if I just do the same style but cover something absolutely ridiculous like My Little Pony lore. And I liked that one. And then I wasn't even really probably going to do anymore, but then I just got struck with this perfect idea for the Teletubbies thing. That, you know, and that was not like me trying to think of an April Fool's video. That idea came to me in like October or something like that, of wouldn't it be funny? I think I read an article about the Teletubbies like film location and how they filled in the lake or something like that. Or they filled in like the valley where they filmed it with a lake. And I was like, wouldn't it be funny if I did like this whole conspiracy theory thing and connect it to Cthulhu mythos and blah, blah, blah. And it was funny. And people really liked that, and it was all good. But then, yeah, after that, it sort of became like this assumption that I would do April Fool's stuff every year. So then I think that was when I started like specifically thinking of one to do, which is how I ended up with the Scooby-Doo episode. which I liked working on that one. That was all right, but I ran into like monetization issues because it was a video, it was a movie, and it was like, oh god, and I got to deal with this every year and blah blah blah. I had to like upload it to Vimeo instead, or Daily Motion, and it's on YouTube now, but and then after that, yeah, the well just sort of ran dry. And then it just became a pressure of working on stuff. So last year I did Lovecraft's Cats and Dogs, just because that was literally the least amount of work that I could think of that would still be kind of humorous. But I don't think even most people saw it as a humorous thing, so I don't know. And that brings us to this year. And this year I had an idea for like months. Like, oh, this would be a really funny idea. And I'm not going to do it, so I guess I can just basically say it. I'm not going to do it because it's just like, it's just too much. It's just too much work. The idea that I had for months was to do like a top 10 scariest SCPs and do it in like a real clickbait style and do like a "what's up YouTube," you know, things like that kind of stuff. And then but it wouldn't just be like, it wouldn't obviously be just my top 10 scariest SCPs. I think I would start it at like number 8 instead. And just sort of just pretend that it was top 8. And then it would start with some SCPs. It would start with like really generic nonsense, like the possessed mask or something like that. Oh, and I think I was going to throw in a joke about like the craziest thing about the SCP universe is that this is all written by one guy named DJ Cactus. I was going to throw that in. So yeah, I would start with like really generic SCP stuff, but then I would start to include like Slender Man and stuff, or just like creepypastas, like very specifically non-SCP stuff. And that's basically it. That's basically it. I don't know. I don't know what number 1 would be. I have no idea. I didn't think that far ahead, but that was basically the idea I had. But it's a lot of work. I mean, it is. It just is. And I don't even know how funny it would be. Which is how I felt about all my April Fool's stuff. So then, yeah, I decided, okay, I don't have the time or energy or willpower to put that all together. Maybe someday, but I don't know, man. I'm always just, the work never really slows down. It's only been ramping up. So then I was like, okay, well, I really, again, I feel pressure. I feel pressure to do an April Fool's video, and I probably shouldn't because it's my channel. Who cares? You know, if I don't want to do something, I shouldn't feel pressure to do something. But I was still feeling pressure to do something. I was like, you know what I should do? Because, I mean, other people suggested this, which partly makes me not want to do it. Because that means that someone out there is predicting it, which is no good. But then I was like, well, I should just do a Gamers Against Weed video. And there would be nothing, like, odd about it. You know, I wouldn't, like, make it jokey or anything like that. It would literally just be a, you know, as if I would normally cover Gamers Against Weed, but it would just be released on April 1st. So I think people would maybe suspect something's off about it, but there wouldn't be. So it would basically be like My Little Pony video of just me covering a topic to my normal full degree. It's just a really stupid, ridiculous topic. And then I sat down yesterday and I started pulling up articles and I started reading stuff. And I was like, I gotta do this. I gotta do this Gamers Against Weed thing. And then as I read, I was like, I can't do this. I just do not have it in me to do a freaking Gamers Against Weed video. It's just dumb. I mean, there is some good things in it that I was reading of like, okay, there's some story here. I could see why some people enjoy this. But I wouldn't really go into that in the Gamers Against Weed video because you'd want to just hear about the sort of meme-y stuff. That's the meme-y stuff. You know, that's what people want. And that's all really stupid. Dude, ground level Guck? That's pretty dang good. So yeah, it's just like, if I was going to do an April Fool's video, it would have to be better than this. It would have to be something at least that personally I find funny. I mean, that's level 1. That's 101 for exploring series of April Fool's video, is it's something that I find funny. And even if no one else finds it funny, I have to find it funny, which is what the cats and dogs thing was. That's why I did the Lovecraft thing, because I find that hilarious. That he was so fucking insane about cats. And to write this entire, like, the greatest essay to ever exist about the virtues of cats. It's really just funny. And I don't know if anyone else thought it was that funny, but that's why I did it. Whereas Gamers Against Weed, I think a lot of people would find it funny, but I don't. And it's just like, I can't do it. That's not to say I won't ever cover it, but it's just not an April Fool's video. So, yeah, I guess what I'm saying is there's probably not gonna be an April Fool video this year. Like, nothing. Because it's just too much work. It's the same thing with Mangg's movies. For anyone around here that remembers Mangg's movies. It's just something that I can't bring myself to do, even if people want to see me do it. I mean, yeah, I'd love to live in a world where I could just crank out videos every damn day and people just love it. But it's just not, this is not how it works. Always easier to make things funnier when yourself finds it funny too. Yeah, that's probably true. I mean, that's probably why the Teletubbies thing works. It's because I found it really funny. So, yeah, people will be disappointed, but, you know, there's people disappointed about pretty much everything I do or don't do, so it is what it is. mean, basically every Final Fantasy video I have to deal with comments telling me to please stop making Final Fantasy videos and just do more SCP. And it's like, pal, the rate of SCP videos will never increase from the point it's currently at. Like, ever. The rate of SCP videos is only going to decrease from this point on. It's just the way it is, man. Because when I started SCP, I did 2 SCPs a week for a while. And we got through quite a few. So, yeah, the rate's going to decrease. And so it's a little worrisome that I'm like being established as like a real member of the SCP community, because it's like I don't really want to be part of the SCP community, you know? Nah, that sounds a little worse than I mean. What I mean is I'm not an SCP YouTube channel. I'm not a Cthulhu Mythos channel. I'm not a Star Wars channel. I'm not a Warhammer 40k channel. I'm the fucking Exploring series. You know, that's it. So, it is what it is. Work on what I feel that I'm passionate about. Yeah, and that, I mean, I like SCP. I mean, especially, like I said, the Memento Mori thing I covered, like, that's some chef's kiss right there. I mean, that's incredible. It was a joy to, like, read and to put together. So, don't get me wrong about not liking SCP. I wish, you know, I'd be fine if there was, like, a dozen DJ Cactuses and Rounder Houses that are just cranking things out that I can read and cover every week. But there isn't. You know, the rate of incredible, lengthy, big, epic SCP pieces is sort of slow. And we've gone through a lot of big, epic, cool SCP pieces so far. There's a skeleton in the rock that I can't hit. That seems fair. So yeah, I mean, I'm passionate about Final Fantasy 14, which is why I'm working on it. Yeah, if I only cared about views and I only cared about money, I would be shitting out so many SCP things. I mean, there would be, I'd be reading every SCP thing, you know, and just throwing it up there, and just, I'd be puking out SCP stuff. But, you know, I don't care about just views. Yeah, I do SCP stuff, and I continue to do it because, let's be honest, it pays the bills, and I like it. I'm not just going to drop it wholesale. But, yeah, I gotta branch out. Anyways, it's enough talk about the channels, I guess. Did he die in the fire? How does that work? Anywho. What was I going to talk about? Board games, I think. We finished King's Dilemma. We had the big epic conclusion to King's Dilemma. Took, I think it was 16 or 17 games total to finish the whole thing. And so the spoiler alert, I guess, if you're planning on playing King's Dilemma. But there's a big epic conclusion to the whole game that plays out. It's basically a war that happens. The kingdom breaks out into like a civil war, essentially. And the council basically becomes kind of divided against itself, with you picking sides in this war. But you pick sides secretly during the war, so no one really knows how everyone else is thinking unless you tell people how you're thinking. And depending on who you side with and who wins the war, your house could be eliminated completely from the game. You don't even get tallied in the final score because you're just done, which is what happened to me. Or you get bonuses in your final scoring, depending. It was pretty exciting. It was a pretty exciting conclusion. It was a fun little mechanic at the end, and Ziggy actually said that he wouldn't have minded if there were like several of these civil wars throughout the whole game. But Ziggy ended up being crowned the grand winner of the whole game. But, I mean, it doesn't matter. That I was eliminated, he won, who cares? It was more about the journey. You know, it was more about the 17 games we played. And, yeah, it was a lot of fun. For $60, we got 17 games out of that. And a memory. I mean, it's good. So with that done, we decided to move on to Ziggy DMing again for a nice, good RPG. And I think his original plan was Sprawl. We got to talking, though, and we ended up switching over to Numenera. Now, Numenera is pretty old school. Numenera was like pretty much like one of the first other RPGs that we played that was not Dungeons and Dragons. And the reason for that was because Numenera was created by Monty Cook, who is a big D&D author. So yeah, his name carried weight in the D&D universe, the D&D world. And this Numenera was a D20 system. It was meant to kind of be familiar to players of D&D. Whoops. And there was a big Kickstarter for Numenera that I got involved in. And I had gotten the book, and I made a video where I was just sort of like geeking out about the book, I think. And I was talking about like the little campaign that I had ran with them of Numenera. And I got contacted by this guy who just found the video randomly. And he contacted me, and because he about basically like playing online. I don't know if I had mentioned Roll20 in the video or something like that, but he wanted to join us to play online. And I don't remember his real name. I only remember like a couple of his characters, because yeah, I think his Numenera character was Richard Blackstone, which is like a very just sort of like, you know, 18th century English name or something in Numenera. But oh, I'm dead. That's when you just log out. Yeah, so that started a whole string of games online on Roll20 with that guy, along with some other viewers. And we played through a bunch of RPGs and campaigns and things like that. The big one was Masks of Nyarlathotep for Call of Cthulhu, which was just incredible, but I digress. Anyway, so yeah, Numenera was like our first gateway RPG into other cooler RPGs that were not D&D. And I ran... This is, I mean, it's funny because this was back... I don't even remember. When did Numenera come out? Let me look this up. Like 2012 or 2013. There you go. So yeah, back in 2013, I ran for them. I ran for my group of friends a Numenera campaign based around SCP, which I was very into back then. They didn't know anything about it. And so I ran an SCP campaign where they were basically agents of this organization. And they were sent out on missions in order to, like, investigate and contain, like, anomalous creatures or objects or things like that. And so it was all like Series 1 stuff, because that was pretty much all there was back then. So there was definitely a mission involving SCP-354. And I sort of had to, like, improvise, because obviously, you know, there's a lot of details missing from 354, the Red Pool. So I had them, you know, in a little ship. They went down the Red Pool. They popped up in this other world that was very, like, barren and creepy. And they went through there, and I improvised some stuff. In retrospect, it was probably not that exciting because it was very railroady. And I should have done a better job. But anyway, that was my favorite SCP at the time. What else did I include? I included, I have to look up the number. 075. So it's a big, like, snail hand claw thing. That, it's super lame now. I mean, it's a terrible SCP, but at the time it was like they could go up against this and try and contain it. And so it's just like a little claw thing, snail thing that runs and, like, jumps at super fast speed and, like, pours out acid. That just tears through anything. And it's, for some reason, it's super heavy. It's 860 kilograms, which is almost a ton. So it weighs almost a ton. And so I think I gave them, like, special grenades that could, like, desiccate the thing that they had to throw at it or something. I mean, you know. What else did I include? I included Fernand. Fernand the Cannibal, I remember that. And I included the girl, the cyborg girl, the cyborg child, yeah, 191. And I think they had to, like, rescue the cyborg girl, and they had to, like, escort her back. I don't remember how Fernand fit in or anything like that. I don't remember the specifics. I think, like, the old AI, the 079, was involved at some point. I think I had them go through, like, an underground complex in a desert, and they had to, like, retrieve 079, or, you know, just stuff like that. It was just, like, a bunch of my, like, favorite, or the ones that I liked from Series 1 way back that I just, like, cobbled together into a campaign. And I still remember it, so that's good. Yeah, so that was that. And then we sort of just, we went online for a couple campaigns of Numenera, and then it just sort of got swept away in all these other RPGs that we played. We moved on to Call of Cthulhu, and we moved on to Shadowrun, and well, I mean, obviously the whole gamut of, we moved on to, like, 5th edition D&D, and I think we went back to 4th edition D&D here and there, and blah blah blah. So anyways, we have not played Numenera in a long time, is what I'm saying, and Ziggy felt that it would be interesting to go back to it and give it a try again. So for those that don't know, Numenera takes place, I want to say 9 billion years in the future. Let me double check. 1 billion years in the future. Okay. Well, I mean, it's like a horse apiece, really. What's the difference? But yeah, 1 billion years in the future on Earth. But Earth has gone through so many, like, crazy advanced civilizations that have come and gone, and now, like, little remnants of these super advanced civilizations are just lying all over the place across Earth. And that's called Numenera. This old technology that's lying around. And the current residents of Earth don't understand this old technology whatsoever. It's almost like magic to them. And so you'll just find like a little part of a more complex machine, and that little part, when you like press a button, it causes gravity to reverse within 100 feet, you know, and it's just like, okay. And so yeah, it's just all sorts of stuff like that. And then the characters themselves are essentially like X-Men. They have abilities due to certain, you know, mutations or evolution, or they've been injected with things or modified, you know, whatever. So you can like have a character that can bend metal with their mind, or can shape liquid, or can go super fast, has super speed, or, you know, all sorts of things like that. It's basically a lot of like superhero kind of stuff. Not to a big degree. I mean, you only get a handful of abilities, and you could pick a character that doesn't have any sort of crazy supernatural stuff. They're just really good at like fighting things, or they're really good at stealing. It's compared to, say, Shadow of the Demon Lord. Your characters are fairly limited in what they can accomplish. And most of what you're meant to be able to do is linked to the technology that you find. The Numenera, the ciphers, things like that. So Ziggy's let me just... How long have we been going? We've been going for over an hour, so let me just wrap up real quick. So Ziggy's idea for a campaign was inspired by Valheim, of course. He wanted us to start off basically naked. Basically, we have close to nothing. And we start off like in the middle of the wilderness. Like we awaken suddenly. We don't know how we got there. We have memories of us all dying in some way. We have a memory of us dying, and then we all we know is we woke up in this wilderness nearly naked, and it sort of starts as a survival thing, I guess. I don't know what all he has planned, but that's what he described to us, is that we're going to be starting in kind of a survival situation. So I decided I didn't want to play one of my usual standby characters. I didn't want to play as Artemis or Gug or Ovum or something. I wanted to come up with at least something original since it's been a while. And so I was just flipping through all the different abilities, all the different foci that you can have. And I liked the look of Shape Liquid. That seemed cool to me. And yeah, I know sort of Last Airbender, blah, blah, blah. But the Shapes Liquid class, essentially, lets you take an amount of liquid, and you can basically modify it and change its density into anything you want, really. You can do more as you level up, but to start, you could just take like a gallon of liquid and turn it into a sword, and it's dense enough to be able to be used as a weapon. So I love stuff like that, where there's just like your creativity is the only limiting factor here. You can come up with a lot of stuff involving hardened liquid. It's not ice, it's just dense water. So yeah, a lot of potential there, and eventually you can shape it into like entire structures, walls, buildings, you know, all sorts of stuff. So it's pretty cool. And I was like, okay, what sort of character would go along with this? And I was like, well, if I could shape liquid, I would carry liquid with me at all times. I mean, why wouldn't you? You could do anything with it. You would carry as much liquid as you could, you know. Now, obviously, in our modern society, it would be a little suspicious if you're carrying around like water jugs from like a water cooler, but you know, you would have water bottles, you would have like a big sort of gallon jug with you that, you know, oh yeah, this is what I drink from, but then you turn it into a fucking shiv or something, you know, whatever. But in Numenera we could get away with some more crazy stuff. And I was like, I would have like a giant like barrel of water, or, you know, it doesn't have to be water, it's liquid, so you could use like, I don't know, oil, or you could shape acid, or you could shape, you know, venom. I could have like 100 gallons of pure snake venom that I could shape into a arrow. But anyways, so I want a giant barrel of liquid strapped to my back. And so I was like, well, you know, and that's when I asked Ziggy if I was restricted to only being a human, and he said no. So I'm thinking like sort of a giant turtle-esque, like a walking turtle. But instead of a shell on his back, he just has a giant like container of liquid that he carries like a backpack. And so that's what I made. I named him Kryn. And he's going to carry around a giant thing of water. It's going to be water to start until I come up with something better. Yeah, so that should be pretty fun. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. But that's going to start tomorrow. And I will be streaming it. So Roll Manging is going to be back in session. Should be plenty of fun. Last thing... We did another family D&D session yesterday with my mom DMing for the second time. I gave her a module. It's called, I think it was called Treasures of the Broken Horde or something. So I gave her that to read. She read through it 4 times. She wanted to be super prepared. But it sort of fell apart. She wasn't as prepared as she could have been, especially when it comes to rules. She really is iffy about the rules. She's got to do a lot more studying of the rules. I mean, she's old. This is a new trick. It's difficult. And you know, I can help out with a lot of things, but what happened yesterday was obviously this thing involved a lot of combat. So we were doing a bunch of combat, and she was like never landing a single hit on any of our characters. And we were just like slaughtering. I mean, we were bowling them over, no resistance. I mean, it was just like easy mode. She then comes to the realization, like halfway through the night, that she was not rolling a d20 for her attack rolls and her initiative and stuff. She was rolling a d12. Yeah, so that's how that went. I mean, yeah, overall, she's really got to learn. I mean, obviously she's got to learn the dice. That's pretty important. But she also has to learn like when to say stuff and when to keep quiet. Because she would be reading us stuff from the adventure, from the pages of the adventure. She would be reading us stuff and telling us stuff that we're not supposed to know. You know, she would be giving us details. She would tell us like the DC for like skill checks and stuff. And it's like, Mom, you're not supposed to tell us that. You don't need to tell us all this. But then she wouldn't tell us, you know, certain details because she just didn't think about it, or she located the information later. We found a bunch of dead kobolds at like the bottom of a hole that had been digging something, and I'm like, okay, I inspect the bodies of the kobolds to try and figure out how they died, and it was like she didn't have an answer. She's like, oh, you don't know how they died. There's no clue how they died. But then like a little bit later, I inspected a chest nearby, and we found it to be trapped, and it's like, and there was like scorch marks, and then she describes the scorch marks on the kobolds, and I'm like, you think I would have seen the scorch marks while performing a medical investigation? Or just like setting the scene properly, or like while we were traveling, she would always just be like, okay, you're there, you know. And sometimes you want to just be like, okay, you're there, but a lot of times you want to sort of describe the journey a little bit, or you know, set the scene when you arrive and describe it a little, you know. Obviously, she's very new to this. This is a whole different skill set she's never had to employ in her entire life. We're cutting her some slack. But yeah, it's interesting. She's sort of debating between whether or not she wants to run a pre-written adventure, where she has to like flip through it constantly to try and find little bits of information, and she feels she has to adhere to it too much and she can't improvise. Or she could run a whole improvised session, but then she doesn't know when to ask for like a arcana check or a perception check. You know, she doesn't know the rules enough. She doesn't know the game enough to know when to do that. So she's sort of stuck in the middle, I guess. Yeah, it is very cool that she's trying. I mean, it's wild to hear my mom in her 60s like describe and rolling dice behind a DM screen, and it's funny and cool. So yeah, I hope she gets better. I hope she continues to do it and she likes it and all that, and we're trying to be accommodating and blah blah blah. But I am glad to have Ziggy back as a DM for our other game. So yeah, all right, I've talked way long enough here. So let's see. SCP-001 Memento Mori tomorrow on the Exploring series. Q&A later in the week on Thursday or so. The specific time TBD. On this channel, we didn't even really discuss this channel much, but I guess Divinity Original Sin 2 and Bravely Default 2, that's going to continue. This Wednesday, we're going to finish Blair Witch Hunt a Killer. The final episode should be exciting. Roll Manging tomorrow, and Two Brothers Play Final Fantasy X will continue next Saturday, so plenty of stuff. But alrighty, thank you all for listening. My name is Mangg. This has been Hanging with Mangg. I'll see you fine folks next week.